Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile, and we're here today back for another great episode. Last week we had that in the podcast Jessica Giolio, where we covered some topics about communication, storytelling. We're still gonna have her back in the show to dive more into crisis communication. And today we continue the topic and the spread because I do find that, especially nowadays when the world is going nuts, it's really important to be able to communicate our stories in a clear, articulate way. So today's guest is Park Howell, who is known as the world's most industrious storytelling, and he literally has grown purpose-driven brands by as much as 600%, which is wild. He's also an Emmy Award-winning 35 plus year veteran of the advertising industry, and now he consults, teaches, coaches, and speaks internationally, and helps businesses, sales, and marketing leaders to excel through the stories we tell. He's also a host of the podcast Business of Story, and which is wild because we did not get the chance to cover it during our recording. He has launched over 500 episodes. So I find it so insane and inspiring. So obviously, he's ranking among the top podcasts in the world. And he also published a book, Brand Bewitchery, in 2020 to help people use his StoryCycle system. So we could craft great stories for our brands. And he also co authored The Narrative Gym for Business in 2021, which is a short 75-page guide on how to use the foundational narrative framework of the ABT and but therefore to make brands more confident, compelling, and persuasive when it comes to communication. And today we sit down with him to actually dive more into also the technology when it comes to communication and how his latest product called Genie helps people to understand better brands and their story in a short second span. So I found it very interesting and exciting in a way. He also did an audit to my brand, Perception Paradox. So we kind of go through his insights and what he managed to get from the Genie like in no time. And it was pretty accurate. So I was shocked by the result. And I'm actually using it right now for my further strategy. um, and yeah, and I think that you will find it very valuable, this episode, if you are looking the ways how to improve your story, how to improve your brand, and also new tools. So tune in. We also have a gift in this episode. So you definitely want to listen for this one. And yeah, so let's dive into the conversation with Park Howell. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Hello, Parg. How are you today?
Zivile, I'm doing marvelously. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
This is so great to have you here on the show, especially in the nowadays, I would say, society and worlds where we have so many words, we have so many channels, we have so much noise online and offline, and that it's so difficult to actually both stand out and be clear and concise in communication. And now I can believe I'm here having with me Park Howell, I would call, I don't know, the legendary storyteller, communicator, advertising guru, podcaster. He started his podcast before it was cool to do that, and many more. I think I could tell so many different definitions of your activities, but we're here to talk communication and storytelling and the branding and the essence on that. So I have a question for you.
Please.
Tell me, Park, how did it all start when it comes to storytelling? I did see some kind of notes about your passion for music and piano, and that it all came since you were a child. So how was it in your case when you connected about this? Oh, stories can be so powerful.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and it's like in everybody's life, especially when you're a kid and you're growing up through adolescence and a young professional, you're finding your place in the world, right? and you're looking for curiosities, following those curiosities, and they lead to passions and whatever. And I wrote music as a kid, playing the piano like in the third grade, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote, just fun stuff, little ditties and whatever. And then I loved it so much, I went on and I got a degree in music composition and theory at university. Knowing I probably wasn't going to make much of a living as a composer, I also got a degree in communications, advertising, and marketing. And really my 40 plus years has been in the advertising world, the branding world, and so forth. But everything I learned about music has been invaluable for me in communication, finding the rhythm and the tone and the voice and that sort of things. Those two ideas of communications and music composition theory came together for me big time, intentionally in early 2000s when I really started studying story and why it works so well in the business world. And my son, our son Parker, was going to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, a very prominent film school. And at the time I said, hey, send me your books and your recorded lectures when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I wanted to know what did Hollywood know about composition and theory of storytelling to be able to really hook into an audience and maintain their attention. And then I found the hero's journey, and I thought, that's a customer journey. That's a brand journey. It's this arc to story that's been around since the beginning of time. And that's when I decided I was going to apply that in my own way through the StoryCycle System. And in fact, I wrote a book on it, the StoryCycle System, that has helped brands grow by as much as 600% using this proven framework. And that's when I realized, and this was about now 2008, when I really launched the StoryCycle System, that I realized I was onto something here. And so it's funny that today I use the communications and music composition theory to teach story composition and theory in branding and communications to help people hack through the noise out there and hook in the hearts of your audiences.
That is so cool to hear, especially you kind of interconnecting different fields, which seems very separate. But from my personal point of view, I do believe everything is so interconnected, and then we just put ourselves into different setting, but the basics and the principles are all the same because we're all human beings behind that, right? And you literally got inspired from music and from the film industry to create the framework. Are we referring to the ABT framework you created?
Well, I first started with the StoryCycle System, which is the 10-step process. And it can be a little bit complex. It takes someone to walk you through it. Or now, actually, we have an AI tool called the StoryCycle Genie that you can put your brand through it and literally refine your brand story in minutes versus months. But in all of my studies, I had to find a way to create the complex idea of storytelling, the theory behind it, down to simplify it. And that's what led to the and, but, therefore. And it, like the StoryCycle System, has been a framework that has been around since the beginning of time. It's not something I invented. It was revealed to me in 2013 when my now good friend, Dr. Randy Olson, who was a Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist turned USC Film School graduate who wrote, directed, and produced movies primarily on climate change and global warming, but really has written books. His main corpus of work is helping scientists and academics take their complex messages and simplifying it using this algorithm of the and, but, therefore. I read about it in his second book, and I went, wow, this struck me like the hero's journey did for branding. And I started looking into it and realized that this little story framework that uses the three forces of story of agreement, contradiction, and consequence has literally been around as long as the hero's journey has been. It's just nobody has really known about it. And so we now apply it in everything we do. We teach it. And even a part of my StoryCycle System and in the StoryCycle Genie, the ABT plays a prominent role because it helps you as the brand storyteller focus intensely on your customer. What do they want relative to your offering? And why is that important to them? That's your statement of agreement that you start with to set the context. Then you introduce the problem. But they're frustrated because they don't have it due to this problem that you're going to solve for them. therefore then becomes your statement of consequence or your call to action. Therefore, imagine when you get at what life is going to be like when you do this with us. And that's a really quick tutorial on the 101 of the ABT.
Okay, thanks for explaining. That's pretty cool. What I'm hearing now from you, this whole evolution of storytelling and communication. And right now you are just mentioning your latest new, would it be the tool, Genie, right? That helps to really also speed up the processes of your kind of crafting the story. How do you see the AI when it comes to this whole communication field and when it comes to creativity? Do you think it's helping us or it might kill creativity at some point?
Yeah, I think it helps us. I used to think that it was going to kill it, but here's what it does for you. And Zivile, you've probably had that experience when you've got to write something and you sit down to a blank page and you kind of have an inkling of what you want to write about, but you're like, oh man, where do I start? And you're up and you're down and you start, the false starts and comes and goes and whatever. What AI I have found in the creative world helps replace that blank page and that blank stare with the beginning of brilliance. It doesn't deliver everything for you, but it takes away 80% of that effort and that frustration that you burn to come up with your first draft, and it provides you that first draft like magic. And then you, as a human being, get to expend 100% of your creative energy to finalize that last 10 or 20% of the document, of the blog post, of the script, of whatever you're doing. So I see AI, especially in the creative communications world, as an incredible time saver, energy saver, so that you can focus your best and brightest you on the most important part of that communication, and that is to make it uniquely your own and bring your own human voice to it.
So that's what you're solving with your latest tool, Genie?
Yeah, well, think about it this way. So, yes, exactly right. Now, when people go through the StoryCycle system, when I would take them through it, the old-fashioned analog way by person, a lot of discovery, a lot of research time, a lot of sitting brainstorming time, and it would take 2 or 3 months. I mean, hundreds of hours to get the findings that you can now get through our StoryCycle Genie literally in minutes. And the way we've trained it, it works off of Claude, but it's our own internal agent. And so all you do is you take your website, feed it to the URL to the Genie, and maybe you've got 1 or 2 other marketing materials you want in there, or in your case, we ran your brand through the Genie. We took your website and we took your LinkedIn profile and just dropped it in there. And you and I had never met before that. I was on an entire community webinar. You heard me speak and then were so kind to reach out and invite me on your show. Thank you again for that.
Thank you for joining.
I knew nothing about you. And so I took your website and your LinkedIn URLs, put it in there, and in under 3 minutes, it gave me a 17-page report on how you were showing up in the world, everything from your brand definition to your brand position statement. It identified your top 3 audiences who you communicate to. And what it does, a particular part of the Genie I really love is with each one of those audiences, it identifies what the challenges are ahead of them that you can help solve for, what are their fears, what are their frustrations, and what are their aspirations. All of those become leverage, fulcrum communications points that you can play off. And then it went in and it gave you the 9 one-word brand descriptors, which are also story themes that you can use. And it identified your archetype, your emotional promise, your physical gift, and all of that. Well, it literally before, when I would do this myself or take clients through it, I would, together we would have 100 hours easily into doing it. And now I can do it without knowing you and put it in there. And what did you think of the findings you got from the Genie?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So as I mentioned to you before we jumped on the call, on our intro call, that I'm literally working right now to clarifying the brand and putting it more into frameworks. So for someone who doesn't know me or has never heard of me, it's more clear what kind of value am I creating. And it was very accurate in terms, for example, of a brand archetypes that highlighting that my brand is all about exploration, which is 100% accurate, that other sub-archetypes would be about being rebel. And that's exactly what I'm actually tackling with Perception Paradox. So that was super cool because I'm not sure if I would have taken that approach going fully through brand archetypes, but now it caused great guidance and inspiration how I can continue developing the brand and clarify the positioning of my own self. So I found it very valuable, like a great report or summary about something
it's like
I've been doing.
Yeah, it takes an audit of your brand storytelling as
awesome.
it is currently showing up in the world. I think of it like that magic mirror. It simply reflects back to you, mirror, mirror on the wall. How is my brand showing up to all? And then you look at that and it identifies maybe some gaps in your communication, some potential missed opportunities, and it provides you inspirations, new, fresh ways to consider talking about your brand. Did you find some of that inspiration in there as well?
I did find some inspiration. What can I do different? It's many, I think, angles we can take right now. And I want now to dedicate time and sit down, but I was traveling through the conferences, just came back. So not fully know now my first one, but realistic to me is literally brand archetype and making it more bold, making it more, I wouldn't call it aggressive, but more like kind of standing out with materials and the tone of voice, because I was always kind of choosing more of a soft side, more like kind of neutral, but from the bottom of my heart and what I want to create is kind of more rebellious. So that really inspired me right now just to go for it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what you can do is once it gives you that brand report of how you're showing up, then you go in working right inside the Genie real time and you have the flexibility to iterate on it and tweak any of the brand elements that it provided you through the StoryCycle system. And when you are all done crafting it, and really bringing your own voice to it, and again, it's probably 90% there. You bring 100% of your energy to refining it 10 more percent, then it will give you a complete readout of your new, refined, defined brand story that is more clear, more concise, and probably more compelling than the way you were showing up in the world. Not that was bad. This just puts a fine tip to it.
That's awesome. And also it reminded me actually, so I already knew that I have to even more narrow down the audience and the focus. So it was just also a good reminder because some of the topics already I'm not covering. And so I'm like, okay, it's time because that's how people perceive and that's how the audience perceive. A bit misleaded about the topics I'm covering. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. But look, Park, so that's pretty cool to hear what AI and the Gene actually can do for our brands and the storytelling. That's definitely super helpful. You as an expert, you've been in the field for so many years in such, I would say, different also roles because you mentioned your experience in advertising. So advertising, it's a lot about stories. It's a lot about positioning. And it's kind of, for me, it's very much interconnected. What would be the primal elements of successful storytelling from what you've seen through the years?
Yeah. It begins with a singular focus on a singular problem solution dynamic, speaking to a singular audience from their singular point of view. So I want to underscore that term singular, if you didn't catch that, because our brain are wired to quickly make meaning out of the madness and chaos of being a human being by crunching information in a singular way. We have found that when you tell a story about two people, you lose 50% of attention versus telling a story about one person. When you introduce more than one problem in a story, one overarching problem, you lose about 70% of your audience because they go, well, which one's more important? What am I supposed to be talking to? And so the ramifications in business is that all of your viewers and your listeners here who are running companies, and I've fallen into the same trap, and you probably have felt it too, is I want to be all things to all people because I'm afraid if I don't, then I'm going to lose business to some obscure market over here that I hadn't even considered before. And really, you need to flip that completely on its head. You need to focus on one audience persona because as the Pareto principle has stated over and over and over again, 80% of your revenue is coming from one customer persona. 80% coming from one customer persona. So in our StoryCycle Genie, we always put that customer at the very top of the, we prioritize 3 different audiences, but we put that number one audience right there, because then we use the and, but, therefore to share an ABT about that audience from their point of view. And can I use your brand story as an example from what the Genie, and then I'd love to get your take on it. So the Genie then for you, it identified your number one audience as the underdog founders, entrepreneurs, and it described them as innovative startup founders who have compelling stories but lack visibility and platforms to share their journeys, facing challenges in gaining recognition and connecting with potential investors or partners. So is that a pretty accurate description of your number one audience and what they care about?
It is pretty accurate. I'm covering underdog founder stories, and I'm focused on the people who are in their early stage of building businesses or who want to start their business, but don't find connecting stories or cases to really inspire them and to push them toward there.
Yeah. So that's a pretty accurate, and it came up with the fact that that is your number one audience from your own material. So you're doing a good job communicating to that group. Now let's read the ABT about that audience. And this becomes, you use the ABT as now the foundation for how you communicate to this audience. And it says, as an underdog founder, you, remember, we're making this story about your audience, your persona, you're speaking directly to them. You want to share your unique journey and innovations and connect with the right audience who appreciates your vision. That's the statement of agreement. But here's the problem. You feel overlooked because traditional media platforms prioritize established names and sensationalize stories. Therefore, here's your solution. You can now authentically showcase your story and innovations backed by Perception Paradox's commitment to amplifying meaningful voices and creating connections that matter.
Real people, real stories, real challenges. It's all about the perception paradox. Pretty cool. It's kind of interesting the way it more communicates from this very business perspective. And when I started Perception Paradox, it was very much focused on this philanthropic mission to actually provide the space for founders whose stories I found back then, or of course now as well, inspiring, but they did not get the attention. And I thought that if some people I know would hear their stories, because I feel fortunate enough to meet a lot of people because of my work, they would get inspired to actually continue doing what they're doing. So it is kind of really straight to the point, that amplifying the voices of underdogs and then actually for the audience, creating the safe space and platform where they can resonate, where they culturally can resonate. That's why I focus sometimes more on Europe, and also based on the maturity stage, because we all like success stories and big stories or big failures. But to get there, we kind of live in the shade this whole journey. So that's how it was born.
That is awesome. And Zivile, what is the one big problem that you help solve for your audiences? I know you solve lots of things for them, but if you had that overarching thing, what's that? If you could boil it down to one word, that singular word, what is it about?
It's about accountability.
It's about, I'm sorry?
Accountability.
Accountability. So what we would do then to really get focused on a singular theme for your own brand narrative, I would say nothing in your story makes sense except in the light of accountability. So now everything that you're talking about is how can you be accountable to yourself? How can you be accountable to your colleagues, your customers, the communities you serve? And you've got some tools and platforms and ways and advice on how they can do that. So you are the accountability person.
Yeah, I guess that's where it's all heading to, right? Inspiration is not enough for us to continue building something, but we need tools. We need some kind of also ways to use it. But when it comes to business creation, so many times either we are afraid or we kind of lose accountability towards each other. So actually the next product I'm launching will be accountability program where people can get inspired from podcasts like this to hear the stories, different ways to do, and then I will launch it in soon, like in April, end of April, accountability program where they have 6 to 8 weeks to actually go from idea to MVP or to strengthen their MVP. So so I guess that's why it should be about accountability and should signal as a brand that that's a place where you can come and get community support to launch and develop your ideas.
Interesting. And so I'm looking over to my side here because I'm still reading through your brand report.
And I did not communicate that yet online, so that's why I think it did not pick it up.
Okay, but that's where you could go back into the Genie and do that. And I'm looking at your emotional promise and your physical gift, and what that is the emotional promise becomes kind of that North Star that people look at. Like, whoever comes in contact with you and your brand and your training and your show and so forth, what emotion do you want them to leave with? So that really helps to humanize the brand. And in your case, it's validation. They feel validated. And can I read the description as to why the Genie selected validation? It says this word was chosen as the emotional promise because at its core, perception paradox offers recognition and acknowledgement to those who have been overlooked. For founders, there's profound emotional resonance in having their journey validated by being featured and heard. For audiences, there's validation in discovering content that aligns with their deeper values around innovation and authenticity. The brand essentially says, your story matters, end quote. To founders, end quote, your search for substance matters, end quote, to audiences, providing validation that what they do, create, and value is significant even when mainstream channels suggest otherwise. So is that a pretty accurate, of the validation that you're trying to help people feel? They're confident in that validation? Or would you change that? Because you can change
I feel like my first word that popped into my mind when you were now raising this, okay, so how would they feel and what do they get, was like inspiration. But I think also when I was going through the report, validation it is actually, because if their stories are not covered, if they are not out there in the public space, what does it mean? It lacks of validation, some kind of approval from a society. And of course, the channel, the media platform, it gives that. So I kind of like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can always go into the Genie too and say, I really like what validation means here. Can you give me an option that's maybe a little bit cooler or hipper or more in the vernacular? And it'll come back and give you two or three options. And then you can choose between which one you want. And you say, I like this one, run with this one. And then it had your physical gift. And your physical gift is visibility. Now, I'm wondering if your physical gift wouldn't be accountability from what you've just told me. But what I would have you do is go back in and add that word accountability at the very beginning of the story cycle process and see how it impacts the rest of your story. That's the beauty of the Genie. Your wish is its command. So you say, I love this, Genie, but now I wish to have accountability being a central theme in my story. How would these story elements play out around that idea of accountability? And literally in under 30 seconds, it'll go, here you go.
So cool. And you can tweak it so fast, it means, right? Wow.
Yeah, and you speak to it because we did all the prompt engineering in the background, so you don't have to. It's taken us 1.5 years to get it to this point.
Oh, wow.
So all you do is talk to it like you're talking to me. And I've had a number of clients say, Park, it's so weird because it's just like I've tapped into your brain and I get all your insight here. And I even read it in your voice as if you were telling it to me. So that's kind of weird. But that's the human robot, gap being closed right there.
That is so exciting. And so is Genie already live or you're about to launch this spring?
Yeah, we're about ready to launch. In fact, I'm going up to Sacramento, California tomorrow to meet with my dev team. And we are looking at the final web app. And hopefully the week after that, we'll be able to launch it.
Wow, so it's very soon, basically.
Very soon.
So basically in April, people
can
try it.
Yeah, they can try it. Have them go to my website. Maybe you can put this in your show notes. businessofstory.com /storycycle, all one word, dash, a little dash, Genie. businessofstory.com /storycycle dash Genie. And they can enroll in the no charge at this point. There will be when we launch it, but they can simply enroll in the announcement, and they can get an immediate bonus. They can take my ABTs of Storytelling micro training course, which is $125. If you're buying it, you get it for nothing. And the reason why is because the ABT is hugely important in the crafting of your story. The Genie uses it a lot. And if you're going to be using the Genie, I really want you to have an idea about the and, but, therefore, and how it works. So if you go and sign up now, you get that for nothing. That's a bonus. And then there'll be some other bonuses when we do the official launch.
Okay, amazing. That sounds really good. I'll put it in the show notes and also just communicate with the community members.
Yeah.
I think it's super valuable, especially that I've got a chance to go through your ABT framework a bit during the Dan Tyres mentorship meetup, and I found it extremely valuable and useful. So,
can I read you something? I just got this morning. I was on Mike Alton's podcast that came out on Saturday, and he's an AI efficiency guru, came from the content marketing. He's a storyteller as well. And he had me on his show, and we walked him through his entire brand story, because like you, unbeknownst to him, I ran it through the Genie and sent it to him, and then we unpacked it throughout his whole show. And then he had his AI assistant write an article about the show, which was really, really good. And they just posted it on LinkedIn. And I just want to read this one little element about how his AI sees the and, but, therefore. All right. And I think you're going to find this really interesting. It says, subhead, processing patterns, the ABT framework. And again, this is the AI talking about the framework. My algorithms recognize the and, but, therefore framework as brilliantly aligned with human cognitive processing. It functions similarly to how I process data: establish context, identify the challenge, provide resolution. Think of ABT as the HTML of storytelling, a fundamental code structure that allows complex information to render properly in the human brain. The efficiency of this framework reminds me of how quantum computing uses superposition, multiple states existing simultaneously until observation. The and statement contains multitudes of possibility. The but collapses those possibilities into a specific problem state, and the therefore presents the resolved reality. Isn't that interesting?
It is very interesting. And that's his AI assistant that summarized it?
That's what he did. So Mike Alton has created what he calls a chief of staff, an AI chief of staff, that he can come in and plug into anybody's business to help them become much more efficient on how and using AI in all the right ways. But he doesn't start from an AI perspective. He starts from a business problem-solving perspective. What's taking your time? What repetitive tasks do you need to get rid of? How can we make you more efficient so you can spend 100% of your time doing the creative, productive pursuits? That's the way he starts. So he loves the StoryCycle Genie because it's one little pilot program you can use to immediately get your story in place. And then, by the way, you can continue using the tool once we launch it to create all of your content. It'll write your websites. It'll do your LinkedIn posts. It'll do video scripts, outline sales presentations, all in your voice, all in your brand's voice. So as Mike would say, we are coming in as the intermediary to take all that minutia of researching and creating that stuff out of your world so that you can create real marketing momentum using your energy on what you want to do, the creative, fun, productive, purposeful stuff.
And that's exciting. I'm really looking forward to see where it's going to lead us. But Park, tell me, how then can we stay authentic with our brand and also cut through this whole noise, because it's so much happening right now?
Yeah. Well, with what the Genie gave you, did it feel authentic to you?
It did feel that's something that actually I could identify about my brand. That's correct.
And then you could come in and make it even more authentic by bringing your own voice and rephrasing some things and whatever, and using some of the stuff it gives you. But then let's boil it down to this core and, but, therefore. Communicate using the ABT because it plays to that pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain. That is in our subconscious. It's that reptilian brain where all of our real choices are being made. So use it and really understand how the and, but, therefore works, so that when you see AI spitting out and, but, therefores for you, sometimes they're not always great. Ours is, because it's built off of my specific framework for the business world. But if you try to do it in the ChatGPT world, it can really get things mixed up. So your humanity comes in and first really understanding how the ABT works, and then use it in all of your communications. From anytime you have a call to action, use it in emails. You'll see your engagement rates go up. We've tested it, A/B tested it, campaigns on LinkedIn in 5 different countries, and we're able to increase engagement by over 400%. Not writing with AI, but simply using that HTML of storytelling that we know how to do as a human, the and, but, therefore. So that's how you hack through the noise and hook into the hearts of your audiences, is using the ABT in all of your communication and getting familiar with it. So if you do use the StoryCycle Genie to clarify your story, you'll really understand why it's working.
Cool. So am I getting it right if someone who is listening right now to this episode and would like to try Genie should actually first do their kind of home maintenance and review the ABT framework before they continue using the Genie?
Yep. Yeah, so if they sign up, again, over at businessofstory.com/StoryCycle-Genie, it's kind of long, so I keep saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
Then I'll get their email. They'll get a personal email back from me, and I will give them the link and the passcode to get in and do the micro-training course, which is under an hour long. It's just 3 modules, and it is priceless because you can use what you learn in the ABTs of storytelling immediately. Even before you use the Genie, you can start refining, revising, and transforming how you communicate, and more importantly, how you actually connect, engage, and move an audience to action very, very quickly using the ABT.
Amazing. So we're getting closer to the end, and I have this tradition in the podcast to all the people who are creating, building, just to leave them with some kind of thought to ponder or some kind of task. So what would be your thought to ponder for the audience who is here right now with us?
Here's what I would say. I would say, as you explore your own curiosity and passion around storytelling and grow using frameworks like the and, but, therefore, or the StoryCycle System, or another one you might have out there, I want you to remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make sure that one is epic.
Wow. Thank you so much, Park. It's super inspiring. And thank you for running through this whole framework and what Genie is about to do with our ways to communicate and the ways we create stories. Personally, I'm really looking forward to the launch, and I'll leave the links in the show comment sections. And I think all the best with the final product development. And I guess will be exciting to hear the results. Maybe in a year from now, how did it grow, actually?
Yeah, well, we've taken about 50 people through it during our beta, and we've just gotten remarkable feedback on how people love it. When's it going to be available? Can I get on it right now? We have not heard a discouraging word yet, which surprises me because of my 40 years in this world, whether I was promoting a client's new product or our own stuff, I have never received such overwhelmingly positive response for our StoryCycle Genie.
Sounds great. So happy to hear that, Park. So everyone, I guess you know what to do next. Go try it out. If you're listening it just on time, you can still get your access to the ABT framework course. So you could be ready for the Genie launch, and have a great day wherever you are. Thank you, Park, for joining me today at Perception Paradox. It was fun.
Thanks for having me, Zivile. I really enjoyed it.